Welcome to GLOBEWATCH with me, Charles EBUNE from the French Embassy here in Yaoundé, Cameroon. This month, November, two events will be taking place simultaneously from the 11th to the 13th of November, roughly 9,000 kilometers squared apart. First, the Paris Peace Forum in France, and another, the Africa Investment Forum in Johannesburg, South Africa. Those two events will reshape global politics in one way or the other, especially the Paris Peace Forum, which assembled roughly 65 world leaders last year, plus 700 journalists to discuss peace, challenged by the rise of populism, especially in the transatlantic community. Just how possible can this be an innovative idea to discuss peace in a world where multilateralism is challenged, although it has the heavy blessings and hands of the Élysée, headed today by French President Emmanuel Macron? My guest today on GLOBEWATCH is the French ambassador to Cameroon, Christophe Guilhou. Christophe Guilhou, welcome to GLOBEWATCH.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, each day there are roughly 11 million meetings held in the United States of America. And each year in France, there are roughly plus 30 million meetings. And since last year, 2018, the Paris Peace Forum is one of those initiatives which has entered into the global platform of meetings held worldwide. Just tell me, how unique is this forum different from other global fora, millions of them, to advance the global peace agenda?
Well, first of all, this Paris Peace Forum was established, was created a year ago. Just along with the commemoration of the end of the First World War, 100 years ago.
Centenary of World War I.
100 years ago.
Yeah.
So the idea behind the creation of that Paris Peace Forum was that today, 100 years after the end of the First World War, the world is going into the wrong directions. There are a lot of threats. Threats regarding the multilateral system, threats regarding the environment, threat regarding public liberties, human rights, norms, trade, etc. So the idea behind was that the President Macron thought that it would be a great idea to gather every year at the Paris Peace Forum between the 11th and the 13th of November, heads of state, trade unions, NGOs, leaders, religious leaders, etc., on a large scale, in order to see, first of all, what is the diagnostic, and secondly, to try to promote initiatives that will bring the world into the right directions.
You just quoted President Emmanuel Macron as one of the key figures in this initiative. This is, with me, a speech he delivered at the Paris Peace Forum in its first edition last year, and that speech contained roughly 499 words, and I was in that Grand Hall de la Villette, where he delivered the speech. I was inside there alongside Angela Merkel, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. Let me just read a portion of what he said. The aim of the Paris Peace Forum is to bring people together every year to promote practical action so that peace efforts made a little more progress every year. How is this applicable to conflict-ridden areas like Syria, like Iraq, like Somalia, like portions of Cameroon, the far north, where we have had Boko Haram, or the Sahel region in particular?
I think that the key word behind the initiative of the Paris Peace Forum is sustainable peace. We need, the world, the humanity needs a sustainable peace. And when you mention examples about regions of the world where you have war, civil war, that's exactly what we're aiming at. What are the reasons why there are ongoing wars? You mentioned Somalia. 25 years of civil war in Somalia. 25 years. Syria, it has been under civil war or international war since 8 years, and we see, so far, we don't see the solution. So, behind the keyword of sustainable peace, of course, you have security reasons that threaten the situation, but behind that, we need development. We need development on healthy grounds, and that's exactly what we need to address through the Paris Peace Forum. And you have a lot of organizations, you have a lot of individuals who take initiative. When you mention the Boko Haram, I've been in Mahwa a few days ago, and I could see the initiative taken by individuals, by NGOs, to try to promote peace between fighters and population.
Absolutely, because the organizers of the Paris Peace Forum, amongst them, the French government, your employer, pride themselves as having developed one of the most honest global initiative today with key observations. And the observations are, quote, global problems without cooperative solutions lead to conflicts. That is the first observation. The second observation is our world is not going in the right direction. You just mentioned that. And the other issue is that this is making, quote, this situation not conducive for global peace. Can we have the key issues to be handled this year at the Paris Peace Conference? What would they be discussing this year?
They will talk about a large range of topics. They will talk about environment. It's a key issue. When we're talking about development, we're talking, of course, about development, sustainable development. There are a lot of practices by companies, by countries that lead to predation, to exploitation of natural resources that are not sustainable for the population. And we need to address that issue. We need also to address stability, freedom of expression, elections. They are the population today in the world, where you have regions where the population is aging, and that's a real issue, but you have rest of the world.
In countries like Germany, in countries like Japan,
France, Italy, etc. And of course you have...
the pension scheme is becoming more problematic to the leaders.
It puts a lot of pressure on the government itself, on expenses, because, of course, for obvious reasons. But on the other side, you have a continent like Africa, who is a very young continent. Those youth are impatient. They don't longer, they try to change the world. And we have to define with them the new rules for a better world and for a sustainable peace. And that goes, for example, for trade. If you see the actuality, you can see that we have the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is aimed at trying to organize.
Since 1995.
Yes, the WTO, World Trade Organization, is there to try to regulate.
Former Director General Pascal Lamy, who is the president of this association, happens to be guest on this program roughly 4 years ago.
Exactly. And he will be heading the debates this year. So the World Trade Organization is there to try to organize trade exchanges. But since a year or 2 or 3 years ago, we see that countries or organizations are trying to impose on bilateral confrontation trade norms, and that's at the expenses of the rest of the world.
You just raised an issue of bilateral diplomacy of these country-to-country agreements instead of passing through what has been coined since 1945, the multilateral world. Especially, you are probably referring to the trade policies of the current White House administration. You are possibly referring to the Brexit debates. Do you think that the Paris Peace Forum is a nice geopolitical adventure to keep multilateralism and globalism afloat, alive?
That's exactly the aim of the Paris Peace Forum. The idea is for the people to take into consideration the threat to international community that posed by groups of countries or sole countries on that multilateralism by trying to exert pressure on bilateral issues. And that's a threat to the international society, international community that we have built since 1945 with the organization, United Nations organization, and its sisters organization, both in New York and Geneva and elsewhere in the world.
Okay. Well, last year,
and that's the situation prior to the First World War brought violence and brought the First World War and brought the second.
Jingoism or extreme nationalism.
I'm talking about there was
a loose world.
It was an international community, but very loose, and countries, powers, tried to extract themselves from that situation and say we will exert our own policy apart from the international community.
In other words, you are saying that isolationism can be quite dangerous. As you are very much aware, 65 global leaders, including President Putin, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel, were at the Paris Peace Forum last year. There were roughly 700 journalists, myself included, plus 6,000 people from the civil society community were present, with roughly 300 lectures and debates organized. How many will be attending this year, and what does the presence of these leaders mean, including the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the Organization of Economic Cooperation in Europe, Angel Gurria?
As far as the attendance from public heads of state, heads of government, we don't have the final figures, but I think it will be roughly the same amount of attendance that we had last year. So for the moment I cannot confirm anything because it's under construction. Apart from that, it's very important to have the heads of the major international organization from the UN or from regional organization, as you mentioned, the ECD.
African Union, the Arab League.
Yes, because most of the crises today in the world are in Africa or in Middle East. So it's very important also to hear in Paris what the heads of state, the people that have influence and responsibility, they have to say about the situation in the regions or in their own countries. And that's very important. You mentioned heads of state, but we don't have only heads of state that will attend the meeting, the Paris Peace Forum meeting. We will have also trade unions. They of course, they have a major role into the regulation of the international society. We have religious leaders, as I mentioned previously, and you have a lot of people that are interested, youth that will try to, with their own initiative, try to fix this world that is going into the wrong direction. The idea is to try to find all of us together new rules for the world of tomorrow in its complexity, because today the world is more and more complex, and the rules that we have adopted 45, 60, 65 years ago are no longer sustainable for the world of today.
Your Excellency, maybe before we move to another area of discussion, let me just get this clear from you. When the organizers of the Paris Peace Conference claim and state, and you used the expression that the world is moving towards the wrong direction, what does that mean to an ordinary viewer watching you and I, or listening us talking tonight?
It stemmed from President Macron. who consider that the rules that we have abided by since or from the end of Second World War are no longer respected, no longer relevant. You have countries who sign agreements and then just as the ink is drying, they're saying, no, I'm not concerned by this agreement. So it's a whole situation that we have, all of us, first of all, to take into consideration.
You are possibly referring to the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Peace Agreement and the U.S. withdrawal, possibly equally, from the Iranian nuclear deal.
I'm not mentioning any country. I'm just reflecting on rules that we have adopted, all of us, at the end of Second World War or even later, and that are no longer respected by the countries who themselves adopted. Then that's probably also because the world has changed. And we have to adopt ourselves, and that's probably the moment, the good moment, to try to define those rules and to try for us to respect them.
One of the key issues to be talked about at the Paris Peace Forum, as from the 11th to the 13th of November this year, will be security. And one of the geopolitical areas to be concerned about that peace and security discussion will be Africa, where for roughly 8 years now, about 35,000 people, most of them young ones, have died from violent extremism. Which are the battlefields and security issues you are investing in Africa currently as a nation called France?
Well, France is very much involved in the fight against extremism in West Africa, in the Sahel Band, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger. Yes, Chad, and that's the core of our investment. But of course, we are fighting terrorism. But we will never succeed in fighting terrorism if at the same time we're not investing ourselves into development of those regions.
The investment you are doing on the continent now is possibly to secure future African generations from the scourges of war, if I may borrow from the preamble of the United Nations Charter, established roughly 74 years now, where out of the roughly 1.3 billion citizens, roughly 700 million of them are young people. Are the youths a top priority for the Macron administration in Africa currently?
The youth is the priority of the president in Africa. He considers that as you mentioned, that this continent is a very young continent. That the youth needs, the youth has a lot of potential. But at the same time, the youth is also very impatient and is no longer ready to bear things that probably the elders would have bear previously. So there is a lot of energy, a lot of initiatives, and that's the core of the French policy in Africa, is to try to address the impatience and the energy of the youth. They represent probably, across the continent, probably 60 to 65% of the overall population. And the efforts of France goes to that population.
Do you think that it will be correct to invest more for digital opportunities for young people in Africa today? As you know, out of the 7 billion people who exist, roughly 4 billion of them are global citizens. Would that be a correct investment?
I think so, because the competition, the world competition, is also on the digital field, and there's no reason why Africa is not present into that economic sector. So of course, Africa and the youth need to be present and need to have the tools to compete with the rest of the world because they also have their own personality, identity, and they also have their own contribution to this global competition, and that's the the digital market.
One of the countries in Africa is Cameroon, and where you are serving as French ambassador for barely few months now.
Few weeks.
We are just from the major national dialogue, and one of the major conclusions of the almost 3 years saga in the Northwest and Southwest was a special reconstruction plan. You just announced that you will be injecting 30 billion CFA francs in the far north region of the country. Is the French government committing to inject cash for the reconstruction of the Northwest and Southwest?
Yes.
How much is that?
I don't. So the minister came. Jean-Yves Le Drian, the French foreign minister, came and spent 2 days here, and he announced that France will be committing 60 million euros for the reconstruction of the Northwest and Southwest region. 60 million euros. That makes 35 billion French CFA. So we have that money ready. We need now to see the outcomes and the conclusions of the national dialogue, and we will see with our Cameroonian partners, with the international community, what are going to be the most important project for the reconstruction of the Northwest and Southwest region.
Your Excellency, this is an information that a majority of the Cameroonian population will be keenly interested. Where is this money found? Through the French Development Agency, and who can elaborate projects to benefit for them for the reconstruction of this part of the country, especially schools, infrastructure, and others?
This is money that we have, yes, mainly through the Agence Française de Développement. We have an envelope that we're ready to disburse for the reconstruction and the development of the Northwest and Southwest region. Now we have to see which are the priorities of the government, of the local populations, what are the conditions to reconstruction. We have to address all these issues, and then we will see how we can contribute, France can contribute bilaterally to the reconstruction and development of that region. But also we have other tools for the reconstruction of the Northwest and Southwest, and that's obviously through the European Union channels. But on bilateral, France to Cameroon, we have that money. We will be ready to contribute to reconstruction, but through a dialogue between authorities, local populations, and international partners.
When would that be possible? Is it the ball now? Is it on the hands of the government or on your side?
No, it's on our side. It's our money. But so far today, if you ask me when are you going to rebuild schools, we first need a green light from the authorities, and we need, of course, insurances that the situation on the ground is ready, is viable, is secure for our people to come and rebuild. If you mention school, if that priority is for the reconstruction of schools, we need, of course, a secure environment. And as soon as we have, first of all, we need security on the ground. That's the prerequisite number one. And then we will see, according to the priorities, and of course the contribution of other partners, including the Cameroonian government, to see where our money is going to be more effective. Health, education, economy, etc.
There are just barely few weeks old in Cameroon as French ambassador, and every word you are delivering here is carefully analyzed and carefully considered. You have been to roughly 4 regions already of the country. That is the center where you are based, the southwest, the far north, and the littoral. What is your mandate in Cameroon particularly, and how have you seen Cameroon?
First of all, I'm very much impressed by the diversity of the country. You Cameroonians tend to say this is African in miniature, and that's a reality. And secondly, I'm very much impressed by the dynamism of the Cameroonian society. There's, as I mentioned, a kind of impatience, and that's fruitful. It's good. I mean, you need that to, you know, move forward and try to develop your country. And what impressed me is that you have a country with a huge potential. You have, first of all, human potential. I mean, Cameroonians are basically very well trained, well educated. You speak two languages, which is an asset, French and English, apart from, you know, your local languages. And secondly, you have a lot of resources in your country. And that's also a huge asset. You have access to sea, you have a lot of assets, and you need, and that's the impression I had, you need to develop much more that in the region and for the rest of the world.
The French ambassador to Cameroon, Christophe Guilhou, thank you very much indeed for being guest on GlobeWatch today.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for the invitation. I was very, very happy. Thank you.
You're welcome.